Hello, welcome to the Let's Start Here podcast. Here joined with me, this is the first inaugural episode. I have Jesse, he's a friend of mine. So we're gonna do some introductions, but first I wanna introduce the Let's Start Here podcast to you. The Let's Start Here podcast is a journey. It's a journey for me, for you, for Jesse, who's gonna be working with me a lot on the back end and other things on the podcast. And we're just going to be working to make a podcast that helps you, the listener, engage with the world, make a difference, build communities where you are, in the places that you are, and to just really make a difference. This is also totally new for me. So this is a documentation of my journey and my process as I go and I meet with a bunch of different people and learn a little bit more about how I can really make an impact in the world, how I can make a difference, how I can help people out, and how I can make a change through local community. I'm the host, Tim Jaffick. I am a student at Brigham Young University, and I'm majoring in math education. I'm very passionate about education, about helping people, about community building, all of that, and I'm excited to learn a little bit more kind of with you and jump into all of these. This is Jesse, he's my friend. I've known him for about 9 months now, and we've kind of been working on a lot of this. And so this episode, I thought we'd both be able to introduce ourselves and then really start talking about where this podcast came from, where the ideas came from, and like why now? Why are we starting now? Why are we starting with a podcast? And what are we doing? What do we hope to do on social media and beyond? So yeah, could you just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, for sure. So I recently graduated from BYU in mechanical engineering, and I loved my time here at BYU. When I was doing my capstone program, it's basically like it's kind of a service learning kind of thing, where the small groups of students will work with outside companies. And there are usually a few groups every year in the engineering capstone that will work with charities or nonprofits. And so the group that I was assigned to, they called the Gare Sanitation Project. And so we were helping out with sanitation in Mongolia. We didn't end up traveling there or anything, but it was a super cool project, a super cool idea. But I found it kind of really frustrating because it became pretty clear early on that there was no guidance on the social aspects of the problem, and that it was a complicated enough problem that those social factors, like for instance, like what kinds of facilities people in Ulaanbaatar would be comfortable using, or what the government would be able to provide, what types of materials could be shipped in. All of those basically determined the success of the project, and I was pretty frustrated that there wasn't as much guidance on those social factors throughout. So then, second semester of capstone, I took classes with the BYU Ballard Center, and their whole thing is do good better. It's the Ballard Center for Social Impact, and social impact is the science of how to do humanitarian work in a way that actually works. And it was just, and it was light bulb moment. It's like, that's what I want to do. I want to be involved with people who are doing social impact in a way that is really effective.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating that they weren't talking to each other. And so since then, I've just had this drive to for interdisciplinary social impact, for connecting people together who want to make change, and for making that change in a really effective way possible. Using the wisest ideas out there, connecting them together. And so that's kind of where I was coming from. And that's.
Yeah. Okay, I have some questions about that. So first, you're talking about this capstone project that you were doing for mechanical engineering. So if I understand that right, it's they get a bunch of kind of college, graduating, upper level engineering students at BYU, and they kind of all stick them on a team, and then you can work for any sort of big company. So you're being contracted by that company, you work for free because you're getting college credit, you're learning all of these things, and then you go out and you solve a real world problem, whether it's in industry or in this case, it kind of sounds like a little bit more nonprofit and impact work.
Yeah, correct.
So for your project, can you say a little bit, just kind of generally, give us an overview? What was the problem that the company was looking to solve? What company did you work for? And then what did you guys end up doing? What did you end up implementing?
Yeah, so it was they called it the Gare Sanitation Project. So half of Mongolia's capital city, Ulaanbaatar, lives in these kind of slum areas outside the city called the Gare districts. Gare is the Mongolian word for yurt or tent, so these kind of tent cities. And there's no central plumbing, and so traditionally the Mongolian people have used pit toilets, and so we were tasked with making a self-contained kind of waste management system that would work in negative 40-degree temperatures, and so there's significant engineering challenges there, but also significant social challenges that the engineering program alone wasn't equipped to solve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what did you end up, was there something that you ended up implementing, or how did that work?
Yeah, I'm proud of the work that we did, but it was, all we really ended up doing is building this kind of a wooden platform and instructions for how to build that, and then instructions for, basically we learned that the locals already had the best solution, and it's just too expensive. Yeah. And so build this wooden platform and buy this plastic pit liner, and that's pretty much all we could do. But,
And have you been able to, did that end up being implemented? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, we haven't heard back from them yet, but
okay.
No.
Cool. So what you talked also about, like, this nagging feeling that the things that were doing, the work that you were doing wasn't quite, like, it wasn't helping the people in which they needed to be helped. Yeah. So how did that start, and like, were your other group members feeling that too, or kind of talk me through that part?
Yeah, I just had this idea that's just like, I really don't want to go in, and our capstone coach actually did bring up, you don't want to have an American solution to a foreign problem.
I mean, like, white savior complex, classical.
Totally, yeah. And so one of the examples with that is like, okay, is this going to be a squat toilet or a sitting toilet? And turns out the Mongolian people will prefer to squat in the winter and sit in the summer. And so you have some that have both a hole for squatting and a seat for sitting.
Functions.
And we were going to go with the kind of 2-seat option, but then our sponsor, the sort of our liaison, ended up just on kind of his own kind of ideas of it, just had it just be a sitting toilet.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, was that really based on kind of information from their culture, or was just sort of an American idea, or yeah.
So I guess kind of part of the big thing, you're kind of hitting on this small thing in a small kind of capstone college of mechanical engineering, but this was your first big introduction into a larger world of industry, where you're kind of seeing this firsthand, that, oh wow, when we try to solve problems, there's this way better way of doing it, which you talked about the Ballard Center. So the Ballard Center, just for our audience, is the Social Innovation Center on campus. So that's where they offer a lot of different classes just kind of about social innovation. And that's where students can learn how to do entrepreneurship, do business, and from all different sorts of majors around campus, they can go to that center and learn how to do better social impact. So a very common thing outside of BYU is something like effective altruism, where you take this, let's go do good. I want to do good in the world. And you say, okay, yes, you want to do good, but let's measure that. Let's see what are the scientifically backed ways to do that. And so it's sounding like you're kind of hitting on this. You talked about interdisciplinary work and social impact, and you're seeing that, like, industry is kind of lagging behind in that way.
Oh, totally. It's just the lack of integration between people of different disciplines, and it's kind of like I remember kind of something one of our capstone group members said. We were talking about some of the technical specifics, and he was just, he just said, like, I mean, you do what you can, but at the end of the day, like, they may or may not use it. Like there's these, this is like the real world, and I'm like, oh, that is so frustrating, because like the Ballard Center studies that real world component. And like there are people who are experts in that real world, and it's like we don't have to leave that up to chance, right?
Yeah.
If we put the same bright, the greatest minds of a generation, if we put even just some of those towards this burgeoning field of social impact and integrated those people in social impact into every industry, we could be doing so much more for the work.
Or like you were talking about interdisciplinary as well. If you take some people, like if during that you took some people from marketing and some people from sales and they mocked it up, and people from kind of other majors around campus and really looked at it from all points, then there is some that's down to chance, but ultimately I feel like that's just that's classic marketing. Like it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna give your pitch, but we're not sure whether the marketing is good enough, whether your pitch is going to just kind of bounce off their ears or whether they're really going to listen to you. But we have people who study, like in econ and stuff, we have people who study how to get people to really seriously think about it, because you guys are really bright minds, and you weren't only working in that capstone group, you were also working with your professors. So okay, so that was kind of a big impetus moment for you. And then kind of how, can you describe the rest of the journey of like your wanting to make a change in the world and stuff until you met me? And then I can go and we can talk about how it's evolved to here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I just had this fire lit under me for interdisciplinary social impact. I knew that I wanted to do mechanical engineering because I love shapes that solve problems, I love design, but I was having trouble connecting with my schoolwork until I found this capstone class was really helpful for that, because I realized that I have a passion for humanitarian work for one, but also it's just this interdisciplinary collaboration that was so missing that and then having all of that directed towards social impact is just, and I just, that's so crucial. And so, but I was still kind of stuck just knowing like, okay, where do I go from here? I was going to write like a Ballard brief through the Ballard Center kind of, I wanted to, I applied for grad school at BYU to try to, I had started some research with a professor in the mechanical engineering department to try to kind of look into this intersection between engineering and social impact. And so there's some good stuff there, but eventually, I don't think I made it into the program. I don't think they ever actually like let me know where I'm at with that. But I mean, that's college for you. Oh yeah, and either way, I'm not going to take that route because it's just and so now it's become a matter of like, okay, I've that whole time I was just trying to find, okay, who else is passionate about this? Who else has felt like they've had a fire lit under them about changing the world and integrating the best practices of different people together, and like, let's set aside our differences and work together. So that's where I've left off.
You can't help but feel you're like, I can't be alone in this. I can't be the only one who's tapped into these bigger ideas. So and I think that's one of the best things about our connection is we were like, just when we met, we like kind of talked for a little bit. We were in the car helping a friend. I'll jump into this story later, but we were in the car kind of taking a friend, and it was just like clicked, and we were like, oh, I see where you're coming from. And there's kind of that big fire that you see in other people.
You're
so
like, okay, so you're, let's go. We found it. Yeah,
totally. Let's go. So let me jump into my story as well, and feel free to ask any questions as well. So this was June of 2022. So this is from here like a year and a half ago about. I up until this time definitely had my fair share of struggles. Definitely have like kind of struggled within the within kind of like mental health space and stuff. Definitely a lot in like the neurodivergent space. So I started the ADHD club at BYU. I've always been passionate about kind of helping people, and like I want to make an impact. So in high school, that looked like me reading some books on positive psychology, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. This is the most revolutionary thing. Like, why don't we implement more positive psychology? And so I went and I kind of looked up like, is there a job that I can get in positive psychology? And I looked into organizational behavior and OBHR and all of that sort of thing. And I was like, okay, that is what I'm dead set on, is like, if I can just, my vision in my mind is, if I could just go into a company, and then what I do is I make the people in the company happier, which then generates more money because they're more
Mhm.
effective. And then it makes the CEO and investors happier.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going into this company, making everything better, helping everyone out, and just making everyone happy along the way.
So you're saying even from the beginning you were wanting to carve your own niche,
Yeah.
find your own career.
No, totally.
That doesn't currently exist. Yeah.
Well, so that one specifically does.
Oh,
In
okay.
organizational
Sorry, I missed
behavior.
that.
You're
Yeah.
fine, yeah. So organizational behavioral resources. At first, I was like, well, I'm going to do this kind of no matter what. Like maybe I'll be a therapist, maybe I'll do whatever. And so as I was looking into it, I found this kind of broader thing of OBHR, organizational behavior,
Yeah.
is kind of the general thing. And so I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And so grew up doing a lot of math and stuff. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to do math and like do kind of applied math in being able to analyze all of this. And then I'm going to go into that. And then, so I was kind of going into that, and that was my route. And then I went on my mission. So in our church, we serve a 2-year mission. I should talk to you because Jesse already knows this. In our church, we serve a 2-year mission. It's a big service mission where you go and you help people out. You talk to them about the church just generally and things like that, but very much you're going, it's a service mission. And so I went to the Philippines. I learned Tagalog. I learned this whole new culture so that I could help these people out that I was living with, which again, some like strands, some kind of hints of white savior complex, which I think is important to jump into, like how to do it right and how not to do it. So I'm actually really interested.
You mean how to do like impact in a way that avoids white
Yeah,
savior complex?
So like if I'm going to help in a different part of the world or in a culture that I'm not a part of, what are the ways to do that like right? So that's definitely going to have to be someone. I'm going to definitely work on talking to someone about that sort of thing and like how to do it, things to do it the right way, things to do it the wrong way. So yeah, very much excited about that part of the journey. But so I went and I was doing a lot of teaching just in general.
Yeah.
And so I teaching people about whatever. And I gained this love for education. I love connecting with people, talking with people, and just helping them out in their lives. And I was like, wow, yes, organizational behavior, that's kind of a big spread, but education, that's really deep. Is if you can teach someone, if you can help someone and teach them things, that's something that's really deep that not only will impact them for the rest of their life, but also that spreads out. There's that saying that goes like, hurt people hurt people. People who have experienced trauma, people who are hurt in their lives emotionally, end up in these emotionally abusive relationships and hurt other people. And I believe that healed people heal people.
Yeah.
When there's someone who really has received light, when there's someone who really has gone through that healing process for themselves, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through connection with God, whether it's through connection with others, whether it's through kind of really coming down to the core of themselves, when they experience that healing process, that healing spreads out into their family, into their community. And like when you put that pause to the generational trauma, it really spreads out. And so I really saw that education was the path that I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so I jumped into the world of education and math education, and then kind of through that saw some bigger things as well, just with like community impact. And so now jumping back to June of 2022. So last June, I was talking with a friend about kind of these bigger ideas and the ways in which the world was connected. And we were specifically, I can remember exactly, we were walking down by the JFSB quad, and we were talking just on our way to lunch. And so I brought up some of these ideas, and I said, I feel like when I'm using my computer or when I'm using my phone, because I had noticed, the night before I was obviously doom scrolling on Instagram and stuff. I was like, when I'm on my phone, I feel like my brain almost gets into a different brain state.
Yeah.
Sometimes like when you're about to go to sleep, you kind of can feel your brain shifting brain states, or sometimes you can feel your brain when it's like you're in the middle of a lecture and they say something exciting and your brain just kind of speeds up, or they say something and you just kind of like almost visibly check out of the conversation.
For sure.
Because I feel like it's that same thing.
Is this that kind of Eldritch, what was that, like
Eldritchization?
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar. That's a big topic, and
yeah,
that's a big topic in and of itself that we'll jump into. But what that sort of thing is that your brain just kind of enters this different state. And with that, you start, instead of kind of emotionally connecting, like if I were talking with you just face to face, I'm emotional and kind of doing all of those things. But when I'm on the internet, it's like if I leave a negative comment or something like that, it's a little bit more distance, and you kind of have to protect yourself from the internet, and so enter that different state.
For sure.
And so I was talking about all of this with her, and she kind of bumped ideas off of me, and I realized we kind of started talking about how there's been, just in general, with our generation, with younger people, and just kind of in general, a shift in the world where everybody is suddenly now more connected than ever. We have the internet, we have like Amazon that you can get anything to your door within like 3 days. We have like flights and like transportation, everything. We're just so interconnected. But then that leads to some really interesting problems for individuals where, like for me, one of the things that I talked to her about is, for me growing up, I never felt really strongly, so I'm from San Diego, I never really strongly felt like I was a Californian or like I was a US citizen. It's like, yeah, technically there's these things that society, like there's these identities, but more than anything, like I felt like a big identity was as a global citizen. It's like, I can see these problems on my phone, on the computer. I see these problems that are happening halfway across the world, and I really am trying to keep myself keyed into how are we all connected. And so as I was talking about this with her, we jumped into these ideas, and I realized that for me and for a lot of people I've seen, with this rise of globalization has come a decline of kind of the things that make us human, the emotional pathways in us. I've like hyper-intellectualization, hyper-individualization, and those sorts of things.
And anonymity online.
Yeah, anonymity online, where you're very much creating a different persona, and then we interact in that persona for 8-10 hours a day, depending on some people less than that, but you're creating your brand online. And so now, instead of just a company creating this brand and this public image, it's now everybody has a Facebook profile, everybody has an Instagram profile, everybody has a TikTok and that sort of thing. And so any one of those you might interact, and me, I have like an Instagram and a Finsta for like, this is the things I want to show everybody, and then these are things that I want to show my friends and things like that. Yeah. And so there's kind of all of these different challenges. And so I started talking with her and a few other people in my life about this bigger thing that is eventually kind of going to grow into this series of essays titled Atlas Dying, The Rise of Globalization and the Decline of Humanity. Not like the fall of humanity, but specifically the decline in the humanity of all of us as and we can very much reclaim that humanity is the intent of the book. And so it's kind of Atlas on his own with the weight on his shoulders is going to crumble because we're so interconnected. If we as individuals try to interact with this and really try to make a difference, or just are ambivalent toward it, we're just kind of going to crumble. But if we all work together, if we create a network, if we work together as communities, and as we build community, that's what's going to save us. That's where we have our humanity restored. And it's in communities specifically that we, it's in communities specifically that we are the most human.
I love what you have taught me about the importance of community. And as BYU students, we, it's like BYU's in Provo, Utah, but we don't tend to think of ourselves as citizens of Provo. Yeah. It's kind of, the joke is like the BYU motto is like the world is our campus, but like the joke goes like, the campus is our world, right? And so, but you've helped me fall in love with Provo, and like I've, never expected it, but it's a really cool place, and I think there's a lot that we can do to kind of own where we live and establish roots here and build a community, even if there hasn't been any precedent for that. Our parents weren't, as Latter-day Saints, like we have local communities in our congregations, but we don't interact as much with like the city, for instance.
Well, I think that's a really important point, and just kind of in general, I feel like no matter where we are, like it was my kind of jumping out of the BYU realm, because there's a lot of kind of micro communities and clubs and all of those sorts of things that you get mixed in with college. And so it was my jumping out into Provo. And I think the general trend stands among any community is there are communities that you're a part of. You might be on the periphery. You might kind of like, yes, I'm a BYU student, or yes, I'm a person in Provo, or a citizen of the United States. But unless I'm acting often in that community, unless I'm doing things like for the United States, if I'm voting or going to kind of bigger events and things like that, or trying to engage with that, I think that sometimes we can be pulled out of that. But it's with any of these communities, the biggest thing that we can do to get involved and to feel a big part is to jump into that community, is having those interactions. And even if they're a little bit difficult at first, is you can claim that part. I claimed my identity as a Provo citizen. And even if I'm going to leave Provo after I graduate BYU, like that's still something I can still reach out to my community. And that's something that I think in general in the United States, like it's really hard because we do move so often and stuff. And so I think there are ways in which, even if we're not going to like put down roots and live in a generational household where our grandparents and cousins all live near us and that sort of thing, there's ways in which we can build lasting community. So
sure. Tell me more about the format of the podcast and why we're kind of thinking of wanting to do it that way.
Yeah. So as far as the podcast goes, so we're going to be having two parts of the podcast. So the first part will be kind of documenting my journey and kind of learning about just the world of community building, of local communities, of the importance. So meeting with people, anybody like that is a researcher or an expert. So things like sociologists, someone who has studied, someone in local government, people who have done lots of like public administration and that sort of thing, and kind of understand the ins and outs. But also anywhere from people like a teacher who they might not have a lot of the background, but they have a lot of boots on the ground experience of like what's happening with the younger generation.
Yeah, so they're an expert.
Exactly. Or a therapist, or just anybody who knows a lot about what's happening.
And to be clear, that this is like for each topic, there's like a part 1 and a part 2 episode. And so like the part 1 will be we're working with an expert, and then the part 2 we're with the community leaders. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So with the community leader, we're gonna have, so it'll be me as the host. I'm going to be talking with the subject matter expert, and we're going to talk about some things and application, and then we're going to jump in and we're going to have a third person come in, and they're a community leader. So anyone from an owner of a nonprofit, a club, someone who runs a club at BYU, someone who runs an organization, someone who organizes group events. Like I know someone who organizes like ultra marathons. And so anybody who's an organizer, anyone who brings people together, there's a really great organization called Weave, and they call these people weavers. They're the people who take that scattered, everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and they thrive and they know what's most important, and they help that community come together and find their common goals. And so the weavers, the community leaders in our society, we're going to bring them in, and we're going to have them both talk about what they do and all of the things that they do, but then we're also going to so we're going to have them, bring them in and hear what they do, and then we're also going to talk with them about how they can apply the things that we've learned in the first half of the episode, how they can apply those in their community. So
for sure.
With that, we will save the rest of this conversation for the second half of this episode. It's super great to meet you, and I'm looking forward to like talking a little bit more about how we came together and how our separate journeys have intertwined and come together. So looking forward to that.